What's going on, guys? The meteorologist Jonathan Kegas, and this is another edition of Tropics Watch, where we are breaking down the tropics as we head into the season's final month on the Atlantic side anyway. We are talking about an area to watch in the Caribbean that will likely become our next tropical depression of the season. So some questions as to how strong this can get. The environment not that great long term. We're going to break that down for you coming up in a few minutes. Long range, we're going to take a look at this a little bit later on in the video. It looks like the Atlantic, at least the western Atlantic, is going to stay conducive for development at least through the middle of November. We're going to break down why that is and why I think that's going to be the case. And then we'll break down where we would typically look for late season development as we roll into the second, really the last month here, November, of hurricane season. Hurricane season officially ends again on December 1st. So here we go. This is Invest 95L. And again, Invest is just the tag that the Hurricane Center gives to these disturbances when they start to become a little more conducive for development. When they become a little more of a concern, they pay extra close attention to these. And then they start to run their computer forecast on these entities. And then that's when we start to get the hurricane hunters involved when they are close enough. And the first mission is expected into this disturbance a little bit later on Sunday. In terms of those computer models, here is the latest modeling on this system. I'll go back to see the spaghetti plots here. And you see there is a good consensus on where this is going to go. There is a big ridge of high pressure building over the deep south in Florida. That's going to help to keep it away from the United States, but it's also going to keep it suppressed for us in the Caribbean, especially through Central America. So as we move into Tuesday and Wednesday, Jamaica, we're going to be looking for some impacts from this. Again, there are questions as to how strong this can get, and I'm going to show you that in a second. But as we move towards Central America, really looks like it's trying to eye Belize, into maybe the southern Yucatan, maybe into parts of northern Honduras as well. So those are some areas we're going to have to be mindful of really watching this. Again, it may not get very strong, but it doesn't matter when it has a ton of tropical moisture with it. We all know there with the terrain, we could have some big-time mudslides and some flash flooding there, so we're going to keep a close eye. All right, so right now we're looking at the European. This is the low-level spin, so we're looking for a condensed ball, the darker red ball there, and I have it highlighted, and you still see by later on Sunday, on October 30th, it's still kind of drawn out. It's still not consolidated into a circle. It's more of like kind of a oval. As we move into early November, so this is going to be November 1st, it does become more, at least concentric there, as it moves beyond Jamaica and heads toward Central America, and it potentially making, again, a landfall with Central America as we move into November 3rd, later November 2nd into November 3rd. So a few areas we're watching. I mentioned about that ridge of high pressure building. You can kind of see that clockwise flow. Really right around Louisiana through the west coast of Florida. That's the area of high pressure that is going to build, that is really going to protect really as far south as northern Cuba, the Cancun area, and then the United States as well, at least in the short term, and kind of guide it due west. Now, as it moves due west, look at all of this brown on the water vapor imagery. That color, that flare up of color there, the purples and blues and whites and yellows, that's the deep moisture associated with a very disorganized disturbance, but it's going to be running right into all of that orange and brown. That is a lot of dry air. We all know it, as these things do not like dry air. They do not like wind shear. They like a nice, moist environment, a nice non-hostile environment, a very calm environment. It's always crazy to think here that these big violent storms need it to be calm or else they cannot survive. And this right now is not the best environment, thankfully, for this thing as it continues to work through the Caribbean. So again, while we may have a tropical storm develop, it's going to have a hard time getting its act together. Again, thankfully, as it moves towards Jamaica, certainly impacts are still going to be possible here as it moves to the west because of the heavy rain. But again, questions as to just how strong this can get because of that. So again, relatively speaking, good news, still something we need to be paying attention to, again, in Jamaica and then parts of Central America, really Honduras and to Belize. All right, there is another little disturbance north of Bermuda. It's really hard to pick out. This thing likely not going to become subtropical. There was an opportunity earlier in the week, but it kind of missed its window, and now it's just going to get ripped apart as it kind of merges with a cold front that came off the east coast of the United States the other day. So, again, good news for Bermuda. This is leaving and going to leave us alone. And then there's really nothing to watch beyond that until we get into the middle of November, really through the middle of November. We talk about this entity a lot on Tropics Watch, on the News 6, clickorlando.com YouTube channel. If you are finding this channel for the first time, welcome. We would love to have you. Please hit that subscribe button. Give this a like if you are liking the content that we are putting out. In addition to this little flare-up, again, what could become a tropical depression over the next couple of days, this is likely going to be an area that we are really going to watch over the next couple of weeks. There are indications, there's some model support that we could have some thunderstorm activity really start to flare up again in the Caribbean and work its way and lift north out of the Caribbean. It's due in part because of an entity known as the Madden-Julian oscillation. It's a flare-up of thunderstorms. It's a convective pulse, if you will, of clouds and rain and thunderstorms that goes across the globe every 30 to 60 days. So it's kind of that oscillation period again. And as it moves through this part of the world, it helps to enhance thunderstorm activity. We are going to be on the positive side of that, meaning that we are going to see that increased activity. Whether or not we can get something consolidated and organized is still yet to be seen, but there's going to be some active weather in the Caribbean over the next several days, or really over the next several weeks again through the middle of November. Now, I mentioned that we were going to take a look at climatology earlier in this video, and this is where we would typically look for an extremely late season event. It's going to be in the Western Caribbean and then kind of lifting up. The reason why these things have a tendency to get going in the Caribbean, of course, is because the water here is still extremely warm for one. They have the tendency to be lifted up from the Caribbean because of now we're starting to see more dips in the jet stream over the lower 48 of the United States, and they tend to pull those storms north. So again, places, and there's nothing organizing right now other than that, again, Invest 95L that could become our depression. But as far as anything lifting north out of the Caribbean, again, there's nothing threatening at this time. Again, in terms of that, we're watching that system that could impact Jamaica and the Caribbean. This is long term, but these are going to be the areas that we would tend to focus on beyond that disturbance that's currently in the Caribbean. Here is where we stand. Again, we are just about to get on the other side of that secondary nub, if you will, on the tropical frequency graph. Again, we are way past peak. We are coming out of that secondary peak that we typically would see in the middle to latter stages of October. As we all know, that was quiet post-Ian. But now we could see, again, a kind of a rare flare-up. But as we showed you, things happen in November, and they typically happen again as you were to move through the Caribbean and then the extreme southeast Atlantic or extreme eastern or southwest Atlantic, I should say, or eastern Gulf of Mexico. So those are going to be the areas you're watching, and then that is going to be the deal really over the next couple of weeks. So it was a very, very quiet start, as you know. Then there was obviously a huge uptick in tropical activity for that 6-week period. Post-Ian, it quieted down a little bit. And now it looks like we could be going into a favorable pattern for the next couple of weeks again. And we'll be watching closely Jamaica and Central America over the next week. And then as we get into the middle of November, again, potential for something to develop again as we have some large-scale features coming into play that would promote tropical development. So we're going to keep our eye on that for you, again, as we move forward over now about the last 4.5 weeks of, officially anyway, the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Again, if you like what we are putting out, please hit that subscribe button. Please hit the like button. That would really help us out. Again, this has been another edition of Tropics Watch. Stay safe out there. We are watching it for you guys in the Caribbean.